My name is Pat Flynn, and I want to teach you how to hold a kettlebell the correct way. So, if you're watching, I have a kettlebell, and I am currently holding it in what is called the rack position. This is the proper way to hold a kettlebell. So, I want to take a couple of minutes to walk you through this. First, let me put this kettlebell down. If you're just, by the way, if you're just listening to the audio, you might want to go to YouTube for this one because there's going to be some visual elements. I will try as best as I can to explain what's going on. So, yeah, but you can't obviously replace seeing things with your eyes by hearing with your ears. So there's that. So why does holding a kettlebell correctly matter? Well, one, it just looks a lot cooler when you hold a kettlebell the right way than if you hold it like this. I mean, this looks kind of weak and flimsy, right? With the kettlebell just pulling your wrist back. I mean, here's how my coach used to teach me. One of my first kettlebell coaches was also my bare knuckle boxing coach. So what he would teach me was that you should hold a kettlebell with the same wrist position that you would punch somebody. I don't know if you have a problem with this person or if you're just sparring, but if you're going to punch somebody, would you, this is how you do it. Front two knuckles lined up with your forearm. Notice that there's actually a slight snake heading of my fist, right? So it's not even like this, because if you land like this, there's a chance that it could bend your wrist back, right? So you actually kind of want to just snake head the wrist forward ever so slightly. So there's almost a straight line. See that from the knuckles right down to the forearm. Now, how would you like to be hit with that? Pow, right in the face. Yeah, versus hit you like this. This doesn't seem like a very strong position, right? Sometimes I see my children who are like 2 and 4 years old hitting each other with this position. Not too threatening, right? You want to hit like this. Well, in the same way you want to hit, if you're a martial artist, if you're a boxer or whatever, is the same way you want to hold a kettlebell. So there's a saying in kettlebells that there are actually no wrists in kettlebell training. We take the wrists out of it completely. There's just knuckles right through to the forearm. There also doesn't happen to be a lot of ankles in kettlebell training. Now this is good for its purposes, but it's also a limiting factor of kettlebell training. We obviously do want to train the wrists. We want to do lots of wrist exercises and mobility. We would just do that separately in addition to kettlebell training. But when it comes to kettlebells, we really don't want much, if any, wrist movement at all. Why does this matter? Well, it's going to, here's the cliche, the safest positions are generally also the strongest positions. And the strongest positions, at least when it comes to kettlebell training, also tend to be the safest positions. So, where you're going to be able to hold and move the most weight is with the kettlebell deep in the base of the palm, the wrist straight, and so that the kettlebell is not yanking your wrist back like this. Hopefully, it shouldn't take much to convince you that if you have a ton of weight that's sitting kind of high up in your hand and just pulling your wrist back like this, probably not going to feel too great on the wrist, might cause some issues down the line. So we fix that by holding the kettlebell as follows. So let me just show you where I want the kettlebell to be in your hand when you're pressing a kettlebell, when you're snatching a kettlebell, when you're holding the rack position for pretty much all the basic default kettlebell movements: presses, rack holds, get ups, snatches, the bottom of the clean. This is where you want the kettlebell to be. So first is it should cut like a diagonal across the base of your palm, right? We want it really deep in there. So here, let me show you with the kettlebell now. See how deep that is? It's way, way down there. And the kettlebell is really sort of resting almost at the sort of bottom corner of my hand, right? So going back to martial arts, if you're familiar with sort of heel or palm strikes, where you would hit with the heel or palm strike is kind of where you want a lot of that kettlebell weight to be, deep in the base of the palm. And since it's very deep in the base of the palm, that is what is going to allow you to keep a very straight, firm, tight, and strong wrist and hand position, right? So just like you're going to punch. Another good exercise, by the way, is if you do knuckle planks or knuckle push-ups, right? If you're doing a good knuckle plank or knuckle push-up, you'll have the same or very similar position. Again, my coach used to make us do knuckle planks on our first two knuckles. Do it on the mat if you want to start on something a little gentler, but that's a good drill. So we would do knuckle planks, and then we would do rack holds. And rack holds are just where you hold the kettlebell like so. Now, it's not just the wrist position that matters, it's also the forearm position. So generally, when we're in the rack, and the rack you can think of as a position that either begins the press or finishes the clean. So if we clean up a kettlebell, which I can't do right now because I'm sitting, we'll land in the rack, or if we're going to start a press, we will begin in the rack. Now notice the wrist is not only straight in the rack, but the forearm is vertical and it's pinned against my rib cage. So if we were to have two kettlebells, it would look like this. Right? What we don't want is what's called the broken arm position in arm wrestling, right? This is called the you're losing position, right? We don't want that. We don't want to be losing an arm wrestling match with the kettlebell. At the same time, we don't want to like pin the kettlebell either. This isn't a very strong position either. We just want a vertical forearm. And then even when we press, we want to try and keep that forearm pretty much vertical throughout the entire press, right? So as we move through the press, the goal more or less is to keep that forearm vertical. Just getting a few reps in there. Feels good. Should feel strong. And it should feel stable. Everything should feel sort of lined up. So this is the proper way, according to Pat Flynn, to hold a kettlebell. Straight wrist, vertical forearm. Forearm is against the rib cage. And that's pretty much it. A few other nuances include when we're doing the grinding movements, we generally want to, give a good squeeze to that kettlebell. Helps to generate some tension. So, squeeze. You don't have to totally death grip it, but give a good squeeze. Helps to just engage everything. The only time I really recommend opening the hand is maybe at the top of snatches, just to ensure that you're keeping a somewhat loose grip. It is important when we're doing the ballistic moves like the cleans and snatches where we need the kettlebell handle to rotate. That is an instance where we don't want to grip it too tightly because then we will slow the rotation, which can cause banging on the forearms, and it can also tear some calluses. But when we're doing the grinding movements, when we're just either holding the rack or we're doing Turkish get-ups or presses or even single arm squats, generally I recommend putting put a little love squeeze on that kettlebell. Give it a little love, squeeze it. And that just helps, again, just to make sure everything is nice and tight, everything is lined up, and you're ready to just rock and roll with whatever exercises you want from there. So let me just summarize this very quickly. To properly hold the kettlebell, you want the kettlebell handle angled, right? So you can see how it's cutting at an angle, deep in the base of your palm. The wrist is straight, and by straight, I actually mean slightly snake-headed with your front two knuckles lined up right down there with your forearm. The forearm is straight, meaning it's vertical, and it is positioned against your rib cage. This is the proper way to hold a kettlebell. And there you go. I hope that helps you. And the benefits of which are numerous. It will spare your wrists. This will be a much stronger position for moving heavier weight. And it's good to do things in a good way. So please share, please like, please comment, please subscribe. Tell grandma what's going on over at the Pat Flynn's Kettlebell channel. And if there's any other techniques you want to see, let me know. Adios. Goodbye.